So hello everyone once again. We will just wait a few more minutes for some late arrivals, but in the meantime, just to remind people that the course that we're here to discuss, it closes on the 8th of November. I know a lot of people who have signed up for this event have applications in progress. This is a part-time course, runs from January to June 2023 over Fridays and Saturdays, so part-time, and classes will be delivered both in person and online during this course. So a nice blend, and it's great to see the return of in-person teaching. It's something that myself and my colleagues are certainly enjoying. Dan, we're out the door with students.
Absolutely, yeah, it's wonderful to see so much activity back in the space in the last couple of weeks, to be fully in class and have that sort of energy, which I think for the purposes of an innovation program such as we'll be discussing this evening, it's really important to have that mix of being in person, particularly for the group work. It's very hard to recreate that sort of dynamic of team interaction online, particularly when you're doing subjects like design thinking and that. So it's been great to have people back and have the academic term kicked off. Yeah, absolutely, Hazel.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so I think we'll kick off now, and I would just like to say thank you so much to everyone who's tuning in this evening to discuss healthcare innovation at Tangent, or more importantly, to hear from our esteemed panel of alumni that we have joining us here today. So we're delighted to be joined by Angela Ferris, who I understood to be the senior community podiatrist at the HSC, but I believe just last week has been promoted, and hopefully we'll hear a bit more about that in due course. So you're very welcome, Angela. We're also joined by Gemma Brennan, the operational lead in integrated care for chronic disease at the HSC. You're very welcome, Gemma. And we also have Miriam Ahern with us, and she is the project manager for nursing home education at the All Ireland Institute for Hospice and Palliative Care. So you are all most welcome here this evening, and thanks for joining us. So I'll kick off firstly, and I'd just like to go around our virtual classroom here this evening to learn a bit more about each of you, each of our panelists. So on that, Angela, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your current role?
I'm sure thing. So Angela is my name, and I am the clinical specialist podiatrist. I'm in one of the new ambulatory hubs. Gemma Brennan is our office lead down there. I actually met Gemma on the course, so that's a good sign of good networking. What I do is I specialize in the diabetic foot. So my main goal is limb salvage. So I'm trying to prevent amputations in the diabetic population. So that's what I do.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Angela. And Miriam, could you tell us about yourself? Hi there.
Well, indeed, and hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Miriam Ahern. I'm project manager for nursing home education at the All Ireland Institute of Hospice and Palliative Care. The institute is a partnership on the island of Ireland between hospices, hospitals, universities, and other advocates of good palliative and end-of-life care. I took up my position straight off the Tangent programme in March of this year. I found the job as a result of the research that I was doing for my project in the second and third modules of the programme. I've landed a fantastic job, if I say so myself. Caro, you can see the banner behind me. Caro is a new programme for nursing homes. It's a joint initiative between the HSC, the Irish Hospice Foundation, and the All Ireland Institute. And the purpose is to raise the competence, confidence, and resilience within nursing homes all over Ireland to deliver good quality palliative and end-of-life care. So I'm leading out on 3 components of that programme that the Institute is responsible for.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much for that, Miriam. And Gemma, who we've heard a bit about already.
Hello, yes. So I'm Gemma Brennan. I am working in post. Just gone back this week. I did the Tangent course actually whilst I was on maternity leave. So the operational role that I'm in is one of the new posts that's still care funded. It's a part of a huge change, moving away from hospitals and bringing care closer to people's homes and into the community. So yeah, I guess my role, it covers people like Angela, from diabetic foot right through to cardiac consultants, and then smoking cessation officers. So it's like a huge, broad, kind of all-inclusive service, right from early intervention and prevention, and right through to exercise stress tests as part of cardiac rehabilitation and pulmonary rehabilitation.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Gemma. And it's fantastic to have such a diverse group with us here today across patient care. So thank you very much. And now can I ask, can you share your unique reasons for undertaking this course? So I suppose you will all have different motivations, and we kind of got a glimpse of some of those potentially earlier on just now, but yeah, if we could go maybe first to Miriam. So why did you decide to do this course?
Well, Hazel, I lost a long-term contract as a direct consequence of COVID. A lot of charities, and I was working for a charity, found that their funding dried up. So I found myself in a bit of a career pit stop last year. And someone who was aware of the program suggested to me, look, while you're looking around for another job, it might be a good idea to sign up for the innovation program. And I read the syllabus, and it's something that I was interested in. And the consultancy, or the contract work I had been doing, was for a membership organization involved in healthcare. So I really wanted to develop my skill sets more in that area if I could. So that would have been my motivation for doing the program.
Very good, very good. Okay, thank you, Miriam. And Angela, why did you decide now's the time to upskill, reskill, return to education?
I knew these kind of hub posts were coming up, and I knew there was a great period of change with Sláinte Care and the ECC programs coming. And I always think that's the ideal time for innovation and change. And I wanted to arm myself with the knowledge to give my hub and my department the best kind of chance. So I went in with the idea of, I was going into these hubs posts, I was going to have a little bit of wiggle room while the regulations weren't fully down to make change. So I went in there looking for terms and knowledge to encourage buy-in from others and make our hub the best. So that's why I went into this course.
Excellent. And Gemma, it sounds like you had a kind of a fallow period that you wanted to make the most of when it came to your study. So you might share your experience with us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, when you've got a tiny baby, you've got loads of time on your hands. Give yourself an extra stuff to do. No, only joking. So what had happened for me was I'd been working in Ireland, and I moved back over to the UK, and I been working for the NHS, and then I moved back to Ireland, and then got a HC job, and a couple of months into that, the pandemic began. So I was pretty much immediately redeployed into pandemic response, and I was gobsmacked. I guess what it's like. People band around the terms that the NHS have got everything sorted, and like everything's great over there, and there's, once you say you've had an NHS job, surely then that's so much better than the system here. But the innovation I saw in the pandemic response, and the coming together, like working with public health, it was a weird experience, being like in Croke Park on St. Patrick's Day, trying to design it as a test centre, and then months later, like being working to try and support residential care settings, and then meat factories, and then the next thing there was a vaccine on the go, and I'd been initially recruited as part of my public health role as vaccine rollout. So as soon as there's a new vaccine, that was me working with the NIO to design how we got it out to people. So I guess I just saw the strengths in the Irish health system, the strengths in the people, and it was just fabulous to see. And I was like, one of the things that I think was maybe missing was that formalization of the kind of the strategies that are used within innovation. And I thought this course, if we could give us the some kind of shared language, I could not only meet a network of people whilst doing it, but I could also have some kind of level of standardization of the approaches that I took, if you like.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Gemma. And next I might ask you all, what did you find what did you find most enjoyable about the course, but also what did you find most surprising? Because I think that's kind of a universal characteristic of our graduates, is that they start with a curiosity. Potentially they don't have a business idea themselves, but they remain curious, and then post-graduation they say, actually, I didn't realize that I would look at, or that my strength would be in such and such an area. So Miriam, what did you enjoy the most about this course, and what surprised you in doing it?
I think the most enjoyable thing, Hazel, was the diversity of backgrounds that people came from, the cultural diversity, the age diversity. It was a very broad spread on all of those spectrums. So I think that brought a huge richness to the program. In terms of the surprise, I suppose it was, well, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, but the number of people who actually came with really, really good innovations in their head that you'd listen and you'd say, God, that's a fantastic idea. Now, some of us, and just to tell the people who are watching, some of us came to the program and we didn't have our own innovative idea. But when you're working through the program, the tools and the frameworks that you're learning and studying spark all kinds of weird and wacky ideas in your head. So if you've no innovative idea going in, the chances are you'll come up with a couple during the program.
Very good, very good. Yeah, and that's a common theme across many of our programs, is that people say, well, I don't have a business idea, and they don't consider themselves to be entrepreneurial in a traditional sense, and yet they very commonly emerge with some sort of an idea, and they feel kind of empowered to progress that. Excellent, thank you, Miriam. Angela, could you share a bit about your experience of the course, what you liked and what you might have found surprising?
So same as Miriam now, I thought the network was really good, and what we've established after that is so good. I thought the support that we got from each other was something that I wasn't really expecting, from all sorts of different ranges. I was kind of surprised for the room that creativity had in healthcare. I always think of it as like a regulatory environment, and you're writing your notes and everything has to be documented and double checked and written in black ink so that it can be photocopied and all this. You kind of think there's no room, but I think the program laid it out so that you can find those little spots, you can find the room for kind of positive deviancy, you can find where the creativity can creep in. So that was what I was most surprised about. And also I thought that was the best part of the course.
Excellent. Brilliant. And Gemma?
I think the thing I found most enjoyable was actually how the course was structured, how it was achievable, alongside the other commitments that I had. And I know that we all know our colleagues, we all know ourselves, like coming, like if you're in a public sector role, or a HSC role, you've come out of a pandemic, or you're kind of still in it, and then you've had a cyber attack as well, which wasn't cool at all, and it's kind of like, well, how much can I go through, how much can I put up with, should I take this on? And you're always questioning yourself, is it now the right time for me to take on but I think the way the course was structured is enjoyable, because the assignments are bite-sized. It's not like you've got this looming huge dissertation deadline. You've got achievable dates. I would recommend that you try and get everything in on time so you're not chasing your tail, but those assignments build on each other throughout the course as well. You're not forgetting what you did in module 1 by the time you're at module 3. You're learning on top of each thing, so that was what was enjoyable. And I was surprised, again, it's similar to Angela, like healthcare is super regulated, and how creative can you be? Does design thinking really naturally fit? And it was that the tools and approaches that the tutors took to build trust within the classroom, so you could never have a stupid idea. You could literally just go download your brain, get into use a different part of your brain that you don't normally necessarily get to use in your everyday role, and then using the techniques that the tutors did to try and bring that back into the workplace then, so that your team in work can also feel safe and like that they have your trust to be creative.
Excellent. And actually, just to follow on from that, my next question, I suppose, would look at how has your practice changed, or how have you begun to apply the skills that you would have developed on the course, and how did you take those forward? So Gemma, you might share your experience of that?
Yeah, so fresh back into work, I haven't done very much. It's only day 4, but in terms of the way in which we've used a variety, like, because obviously with integrated care, you're in these hubs and you're co-located, but obviously not everyone's there at the same time. You're doing a lot of video conferencing with other partners, other stakeholders, other hubs. So the electronic tools that we used, like the electronic whiteboards and things like that, that's something that I'm a lot more confident using, and not making people use, but like encouraging other people to use. And yeah, I think mainly the trust building kind of exercises and the language used to kind of make sure that we haven't already tried to come up with a solution at the start. We're actually, properly analysing the problem first. Those kind of things is what I'm going to bring. Yeah.
Very good, thank you. And Miriam, what does the application of the skills that you've learned on the course, what does that look like in your role as a project manager?
I think, Hazel, when you go through a program like that, there's 2 dimensions to it. One is you're coming out the other end, I suppose, trained and developed in entrepreneurship or innovation, but the individual tools and frameworks that you learn along the way, you'll find yourself using them in all kinds of situations and circumstances, even in your personal life. There are things that you can adapt. So I couldn't really pick out any in particular. I did come across in the branding exercise for the new CARU program that's yet to be launched. The marketing company who are working on that did a lot of persona work. So, I mean, I went into that very familiar with their methodology in that. But, I mean, the bottom line would be that all the individual tools and tactics that you learned come into play at various stages.
Very good, thank you. And Angela, then, how has your practice changed since you completed the course?
So, in a couple of ways. One of the principles of integrated care is that the patient is considered the stakeholder throughout, from start to finish. So I actually done an interview with 3 prospective patients and created an empathy map and a user persona for them. And I shared that with the diabetes team. So I suppose we have a better understanding of our patient and a better sense of trust because of the empathy maps and things like that. We know what they're looking for and what they consider as gold standard. So that's kind of what I used for that side of it. And then the other kind of ways, we also done a project throughout it on the trends. One of the topics that I got was the socioeconomic trends, and we narrowed in on Dublin, North City and County. So we used like Health Atlas and CSO and all those kind of statistics to really understand our population group. So we have a really good understanding of the different ethnic groups, ages, in order to like individualize and target our care. So I think having a better understanding of our patient, like on an individual level as well as on a population level, is something that I've definitely took from the course into my work.
Very good, because I suppose there is a keen focus on developing your ability to recognize opportunities, and also then to develop the confidence to pitch your ideas to people. So did you find that improved, Angela, during your time?
For sure. And like with that research that was done, particularly on the kind of ethnic minorities that were in my CHO, my population area, I brought that to my manager. And what was happening was I was getting a lot of referrals from Balseskin, which is the National Reception Centre, and it's in Finglas. But these people were having difficulties getting to me, getting the buses, and there was language issues. So using the kind of information and the research that I'd done, we moved our diabetes team to Balseskin. So we do a clinic out there, an outreach clinic. But I think the only way that was, able to get that across to the managers was because of the research that we had done. So we needed that backup and we needed that language to be able to convince the managers to let us get out there.
Excellent, super to hear that. Now I just would like to ask my panel about the change that's occurred over the past number of years and how skills acquired on this course might have helped us and the industry, might help the industry kind of weather kind of further change. So the past couple of years, obviously, they've been tremendously challenging for the industry. It's had to grapple grapple with constant change and disruption. And I know from speaking to some of our the designers of this program, including my colleague Jill, she would say that the whole a key focus of this course is that you develop the tools to be comfortable with discomfort and to become comfortable with being challenged. And you know, this might be considered a unique skill to have in quite a traditional industry, which you referred to, Angela, that's so heavily regulated, and rightly so. So I just might start with you, Miriam, on this one. How has your attitude to disruption and changed since you undertook this course? And would you say you're now more comfortable sitting with your discomfort?
Well, Hazel, as the politicians would say, I'm delighted you asked me that. I was an internal consultant in multinational technology PLC during the dot-com years. So disruption was our bread and butter. So I have very high respect and tolerance of it. What I'm observing now, particularly working with the nursing homes, is the disruption that the 2 COVID years have brought huge opportunities for innovation. Things were done that people were told it would take years to do, or things were changed that people were told could never be changed, and they were changed overnight. So if I was an enthusiast of disruption before, I'm absolutely a fan of it now. I think it's great. You need disruption for innovation.
Very good. Thank you for that. And Gemma, do you think that the course has allows people to become more resilient and more adaptive to change and more comfortable with that change?
I think that it makes you reflect inwards on what your likely initial reactions are to change, because that can obviously then shape how others perceive you through a change process. And it makes you realize that, you know, the way you react to one change might be different from the next change that comes down the line. It's not like you're the, you know, early adopter on every single thing, you know. So I guess it makes you more self-aware of your own characteristics when it comes to change. But also what I found, like the Irish healthcare industry and system, you know, it's not the biggest. So, you know, the reactions of the people in your class are really important to observe as well, because you're always going to come across, like the personas that we create, we're always going to come across different colleagues and different types of personalities that react in different ways. And that's what I found really interesting. Whereas in the pandemic, it was such firefighting, such chaos. And the course is structured in such a way that you can actually, there is some structure on the chaos. So you have the time to truly like self-reflect, you do, you know, reflective essays, and you can have a think about, you know, well, how did that affect my classmates when I was feeling this? What were they feeling? So that's what I enjoyed, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And, you know, another kind of a commonality among all of our adult education offerings here at Tangent is that, you know, we're very conscious that the adult learner community is a very busy one. You're usually juggling a number of priorities, work, family, and now study, obviously, on top of that. And so we'd be very mindful in designing our assessments and our coursework that they have real world value and they're not done in a kind of an academic vacuum. So this is kind of a broad question to the panel around your coursework during the certificate. And might any of you be willing to share your experience around the use of your coursework, and were you able to bring that coursework back into your organization to bring about change? And Miriam, I'll go to you first, because I believe Jill mentioned you, and she said that you did some piece of coursework, and you had used your place of employment, or there was some transfer of ideas there happening.
I'm not sure what she means, Hazel, because I was out of work when I was doing the program, but I certainly brought what I learned to my job search and certainly to my interview. It gave me a language and a context within healthcare that I didn't have before, and there's absolutely no way I would have performed at the interview the way I did without having done all the research that I did during the program. So I suppose it's early days in the job to be bringing the learning to the job, but I certainly brought the learning to getting the job.
Very good. Thank you for that. Angela, were you able to use your coursework at all then and to apply it to your organization?
Definitely with the empathy maps, the user persona and the language. And that would have been one thing that I would have considered a personal vulnerability before I started the course. I always kind of felt like, I suppose it was an insecurity that I wasn't long in the HSE, wasn't long working. I only graduated in 2017. So I wanted to kind of be able to talk the talk essentially. So I think I've brought those words and language in. It's not necessarily directly to the HSE, but one of my ideas for the last project, the idea that I had, the innovation, which is kind of like a Dragon's Den style project done at the end for anybody that's listening, was actually a pair of socks, which sounds a bit silly, but it did work out in the end. It was socks that change color when they come into contact with blood. So they indicate trauma before a patient with neuropathy can feel it. So patients with diabetes can't feel their feet. So if they can have a visual cue to see there's something wrong, that was the idea. So I actually contacted the local enterprise office and they have given me a $5,000 grant to go and get it made in prototype. So we have brought something out of this. So it's a good start.
Congratulations, that's fantastic. Well done on that. So just finally then, it's clear, we know here just in terms of the popularity of this course, it's our most popular course across our suite of postgraduate offerings, that there's clearly an appetite for healthcare innovation in Ireland. But people may not know where to go or what next steps to take, should they have an idea or a thought on how to make things better and just how to improve the delivery of patient care. So finally, I just ask each of you, what advice would you give to someone here this evening who wants to innovate potentially within their own organization, or perhaps they have an idea for a solution or an improved delivery process, but they're not sure how to advance with that. So Gemma, what would your piece of wisdom be?
My piece of wisdom would be to try and frame your idea. I guess this course helps you do that, like with the language and the structure and things, but within each organization, there's an appetite and there's a culture for change, and knowing the size of your idea. Is it too big? Is it not feasible? Is it something that somebody else might have already been, is it new enough? Is it exciting enough? There's so many things. Everyone who's listening will know that there's at any point in time you probably can think of 10, 20, 30 things that could be done differently, or there's so many problems that need to be solved. So I guess it's like being aware of your organizational culture. If you're in a small a small business, you might have the flexibility to try new things. If you're in a giant part of maybe the HSC that's maybe like a giant slow to change ferry, then the way you frame that idea might be different. And so ask leaders that you respect in your organization for examples of successful change that's happened. Ask them like how you can influence that. I know that from my NHS experience, we created like a bright ideas template, so you could just do a case on a page, and we had so many ideas. And don't get disheartened if your idea isn't supported or selected, because it's just a matter of time before one of your ideas will be. And once you've had that experience of a good idea that is followed through and supported, then you can use that structure to then have more.
Very good, very good. And Angela, what would your piece of wisdom be for any would-be healthcare innovators here this evening?
Probably know your target audience. So I think with the way the HSE works, often those on top are admin staff and don't have clinical background. So I think sometimes, not always, but appealing to their empathetic nature isn't always the way. If you can speak to them in their language and talk about numbers and talk about business and stats, that'll often get you your way, rather than trying to say, oh, what about the patients? Like sometimes I find if you can frame it in a way like there's 3,700 amputations a year, 10% of reduction in them saves the HSE 10.1 million. If you say that to the right person, they're going to listen to you, versus how many toes are lost, per year. So I think it's just speak to your target audience and know who you're speaking to, and you'll get what you want that way.
Very good, very good. And Miriam, finally then, what would you advise attendees here this evening who might have some idea in mind and they're not sure how to progress it?
Well, I think if they're here this evening, they've already taken a good first step. A program like this one, and you know, I mean, okay, we're here to promote the program, but let's be realistic as well. If you come into the program with an idea, you're going to get a complete end-to-end framework to test your idea, see if it's viable, and bring it to the stage where you can look for funding or look for support. You'll have a class of 30 or so peers who'll take your idea apart in the most supportive kind of way and possibly put it back together again, even better than you came in with it. So I think in terms of value for effort, there isn't an awful lot more that you can do than come into a program like this and really test your idea. I think you'll come out of it very strong at the other end and very well prepared to put together a strategy to move on to the next step.
And I think I completely agree, Miriam. And I think that like the thing that was I was anxious about going in was that I didn't really, you know, I wasn't kind of like, I didn't have a product idea. I didn't have what was kind of like a tangible kind of thing that I could talk about really easily. And it's not about necessarily that. It can be, you know, the diversity within the class means that some people are coming in with a business idea that they've had in their head for years that they want to, you know, progress. And other people will be coming in like myself and Angela going, well, we're in very diverse, complex community roles. So how does that work? You know, and the links it gives you with the industry and the way, you know, the business side of things, and how successful entrepreneurs have worked. You know, one of my favorite days was when the entrepreneurs, you know, were talking all about their experiences and how many times they've been sued and how many failures they've had and how they were so resilient. Like they it was like water off a duck's back. You know, they motored on. They knew what was, you know, what was motivating them, and that was really, really good.
Yeah, I think we should say to the Hazel that if you're coming into the program, I tell people I came in with my eyes wide shut. I had no idea what a robust program it was and how much work I would have to do personally and how stretched I would be by the projects and homework that we had to do in the modules. So whereas it is doable, nobody should come in thinking, you know, I'll just do this to mark time or whatever. You will have to put effort into it, but at the other end, you're coming out with the Trinity certificate, and there is huge value in that. But in order to get that, you know, you have to do it. It is a serious program as well. So I think we just need to put that reality check in place for people, because the three of us obviously enjoyed it hugely, which we did. But by Jiminy, I mean, my hat goes off to Gemma for doing it on maternity leave. I have no idea how you pulled that off, Gemma, but it was hard work, but it paid off.
Yeah, and yeah, it is a level 9 and it is an accredited qualification from Trinity, and we're the leading university for producing student entrepreneurs, and it's kind of no coincidence, and it is thanks to the rigor of our programs, especially our accredited programs such as this. So but thanks for that contribution, Miriam, and important for balance, I think, because people might underestimate. They may see the contact hours, and while it is a part-time program, there is work expected. However, you do get back what you put in, which is, I think, something you're attesting to here very kindly, Miriam. And just to pick up, Gemma, on what you said, we would also hear a lot from students that the richness granted by that interdisciplinary work is what people really savor, that they get to mix with practitioners and people, you know, whether, you know, practitioners or admin staff or whoever else, that they just wouldn't have cause to work with in that kind of playful, exploratory way in any other context. And great things can happen when people come together like that. So fantastic. But yes, to Miriam's point, well done for getting through it. And I suppose it was a particularly trying time as well in context historically for the industry and everyone globally, of course, to kind of get through it. So thank you for that. Now, I could speak about the course at length, but I don't think I could do it as much justice as our head of education could, who is here with us today that's Dan Rogers. So I invite Dan now to just chat around the course particulars. What does it look to be an eligible candidate? What does it look like to be eligible? Fees, time commitments, etc. So thanks, Dan.
Sure, thanks, Hazel. And maybe just before I do that, just to say it's been a really fascinating discussion. I've been listening intently here. I feel like I have knowledge of this program from one particular perspective, and it's just wonderful to hear from people who've been through the program and come out the other end of it and sort of had all of those experiences. A couple of things just really jumped out at me there. One, the diversity piece. You know, often people would have a particular idea of who would be on a healthcare innovation course, but actually, you know, fundamental to the learning experience on this course is that you're going to have people from different backgrounds, different disciplines, different ages, and that's ultimately how creativity and innovation flourishes, you know, within that kind of environment. And yes, disruptive thinking is a core aspect of the course. I think if you're not when you go in, you will be when you go out. When you leave, you'll have greater comfort with ambiguity, most definitely. I think that's a fundamental aspect of learning about innovation, I guess. One of the things people mentioned support along the way. I think one of the things that we hear time and time again from alumni is that there are great personal and professional relationships built on courses like these that endure well beyond the course's completion. So yes, that can evolve into a professional network, but it can take the form of all kinds of supports, and just not to underestimate that. I think for anybody interested in a course like this, it's a wonderful opportunity to meet people interested in a similar field. I would absolutely agree with the points made around the level 9 qualification. This is a serious course, I think, as it was very clearly put there. I think it is continuously assessed, so you don't have exams in this course. So it is continuously assessed, and that's really for a reason that I suppose we don't really believe in putting a numerical grade per se against all areas of assessment associated with innovation, because much of it is about actually being able to demonstrate where possible your skill set in the area, and you'll do that through a number of different sort of practical exercises, both in group and individual exercises, and written pieces and reflections as well. In terms of the course itself, so it's a 30 credit level 9 postgraduate certificate course. So it's at level 9 on the National Framework of Qualifications. It's made up of 3 10 credit modules. The first module is innovation and creativity in healthcare, and that's largely focused on looking at you know, exploring concepts like creativity, design thinking, user experience, empathy mapping, and all within a healthcare context. Then and a lot of group work and getting to know your colleagues in the context of that, or in the course of that. And then module 2 is opportunity generation and recognition. That's largely focused on how can we be more, I was going to say how can we think more like entrepreneurs, but how can we be more opportunity oriented in terms of just identifying those opportunities for innovation and it's not always necessarily the big changes. It can be the frugal or the incremental innovations within our organization that we might be more inclined to notice, you know, when we explore this kind of opportunity oriented piece. And then the third module is enterprise development, and that focuses on the nuts and bolts really of setting up an enterprise. As was mentioned, you don't need to come to this course with a preformed business idea, or even, you know, an idea that you want to develop. You can be really just, you know, have a strong interest in this area. We are looking for people who are ideally working in the healthcare field or are seeking to work in the healthcare field and have a particular interest in innovation. In terms of the eligibility criteria for the course, so it's a level 8 honors degree is the minimum academic eligibility for the course, and there is what we call what's called in Trinity the recognition of prior learning route. So if you don't have the level 8 qualification, but you have equivalent industry experience, sometimes combined with other qualifications, you can apply via the RPL route. So yeah, so those are the 2 types of applicants in terms of eligibility. If you are applying under the recognition of prior learning route, all applicants will write a letter of motivation. Under the RPL route, it's really important that you outline why you want to do the program in the context of your experience to date, but also how you will apply your learning from the program going forward. That's particularly important. Other documentation that people submit during their application would be their CV, along with that motivation letter, copies of their transcripts, and 2 references. So an academic reference and a professional reference are required to submit. The course begins on the 9th of January, and it runs for 24 weeks on Fridays and Saturdays. The finish date is the 17th of June. It's blended course, so it's part online, part in class. The timetable is published on our website, so you can see the breakdown there of which classes are online and which classes are in person. Applications must be submitted by the 8th of November, but just to reiterate what Hazel said earlier, which is that applications are being reviewed on a rolling basis. So if the course fills with eligible applicants in advance of that, we will close applications, but the final cutoff for submitting is the 8th of November. So for anyone who has an interest in this course, please do get your applications in as soon as possible, but also get in touch if you're unsure about any aspect of the application process. So Jane Flanagan, who is our student recruitment officer, would be really happy to help you with that application and guide you through the process to any degree. So please do get in touch with us if you have any questions about the process itself. Springboardcourses.ie and search for TCD and you'll find the course, or go directly to the Tangent website and there'll be a link directly to apply. So we apply via the Springboard website, but you can get to that link via the Tangent website. So if you Google TCD Tangent, our website will come up, and then we'll link you to the Springboard Courses website. And so I mentioned academic eligibility, just to also mention the funding eligibility. So there's 2 types of applicant in terms of funding. If you are in employment and meet the relevant criteria, you will be 100%. You will be 90% funded, so you'll only pay 10% of the course fee, which, and I should have that figure off the top of my head, but I'll just get it now.
€380, which is a
380, yeah.
Positive bargain
for
a level 9 qualification.
Absolutely. So the qualification, were you to pay full fees, would be €3,800. And if you are in employment, you're eligible to pay 10% of those. If you are not in employment and meet the relevant criteria, you will be potentially 100% funded for the course. So generously funded under the HEA Springboard Plus initiative. It's a great opportunity to get a level 9 qualification in this area from Trinity. Yeah, absolutely. I think I've covered most things there. Hazel, is there anything else I've left out?
No, I think that's everything. So thank you for that. Now I suppose to turn to any questions that anyone might have, and I see we have one submitted just now from.
So Hazel mentioned there was a question in the chat. So I'm just looking to see.
She just said, do you have many healthcare professionals as guest speakers highlighting particular challenges within the sector? As far as I remember, the guest speakers were the entrepreneurs that had identified problems themselves. I don't want to ruin it on anybody, but some of them were really, really interesting and really, really cool. I actually think it was a teacher that identified one of the problems in the entrepreneur guest panel speaking. And she talked about a challenge that she had noticed throughout her career and, what she'd done to correct that challenge. And she started with a problem and then came with the innovation. So that's as far as I remember. I don't remember anybody kind of addressing any other challenges.
If I could just add there, I think I learned as much from my fellow students with healthcare backgrounds as I did from the entrepreneurs. I mean, a lot of them were well advanced in terms of developing ideas.
Yeah, you wouldn't be the first to say that, Miriam. I think the peer learning aspect is hugely powerful. Yeah, most definitely.
And it was definitely in chat amongst ourselves about our own challenges, and like bouncing ideas off each other was definitely a big thing. Like we'd be in those little groups, those little breakout rooms so often, we'd have so much time to be chatting with each other that we'd be talking about our own challenges and, oh, have you done this? You might have thought about this, or this is what I do. Your challenges are nearly sorted in them breakout rooms. Never mind the guest speakers, we'll sort them out ourselves between us.
I don't know whether we mentioned like about the group work that's involved. So not every assignment's an individual assignment. So initially it's like, oh god, group work, and then you realize that you're the wealth of knowledge that you're gaining from and the skills you're getting from working as a team. It's like, this is what's the transferable stuff.
Yeah,
so
Definitely, like when I was in college, group work was obviously we were forced to do these assignments, and it wasn't all a common denominator. We weren't all here for the one passion. So there's always two people that done the work and the rest kind of dodged on. And that's what I was kind of dreading for, like, some of the assignments are group assignments and they're like large enough and you're just wondering, oh, will everybody do their share? But I think there's a common passion when you're doing this course and everybody really puts it in. So it's not the same as the college group work. It is definitely different as adult learners.
Great, yeah. Great opportunity to learn about oneself as well as others, I always find, with group work.
And have we any other questions for our panel here, or indeed Dan, on the course?
I'm looking in the chat there, Hazel. I don't see if there's any questions coming in now. I don't see any new ones. I'm just checking there 1 second. Oh,
sorry, somebody's just asked how many students per course?
Oh yeah, see. How many students per course? So 42 is the typical class size for this program.
And I'm sure many of you have found out about this event on our website, but just to make people aware that we also have a callback function. So you can request a callback from a member of our student recruitment team. If you have any questions, particularly around eligibility and what category you might fall into. So I invite you to use that. You know, it can be very, very helpful to get your questions asked and answered in a quick way. As Dan said, if you're considering an application, there are many parts required before you can fully submit your application and an offer can be made, but it's always wise just to begin it, just start your application. I would advise you do that kind of sooner rather than later to avoid disappointment, because we do get people applying the week post our closing date. So just to give yourself the best chance of if there's any documents outstanding or that, we can get in touch and walk you through what's needed to get you across the line. So that's it really in a nutshell.
There's another question there, Hazel, in the chat. What type of hours outside the core hours would be required per week to dedicate to extra study? And I'm smiling to myself. Just look at Gemma. If Gemma could do it with a new baby, you know, you'll do it. You'll manage.
I think it's like about you have to fit it in around your commitments, and the group work's difficult because you have to obviously schedule it around other people's commitments as well. But like I guess it really depends. The more you put in, the more you get out.
I think it's varied for everybody. Like the groups kind of decide. You're in your own little groups for the assignments, group assignments. And it just depends on your group. Like you decide in your own little WhatsApp groups, oh, will we meet tonight on Zoom at 7:15 for half an hour? Will we do, like, you try and organize it yourself. I didn't find that there was a lot of like study. There was a lot of like practical work that I was doing. So I was probably researching rather than like sitting and rota learning. I would say I gave it a Sunday morning. So I done 9 to 12 every Sunday morning, and that was my set time. And then I went with the groups as well and done whatever meetings I could slot into. So that was my experience of the hours.
I think that's an important point. I think like there's a number of effort hours, I suppose, included beyond the actual contact hours, and they can vary from person to person in terms of how long it will take given the individual to complete an assignment or to do a piece of reading. But there will be, you know, recommended reading that will be for outside of class. There will be individual assignments, and then obviously the group work will be aligned to when the groups are available to do it. I think it would be. I think that's a really good estimation of if you could allocate a morning a week. I would say somewhere between sort of 4 to 6 hours a week outside of the contact hours should cover you.
Wonderful, thank you, Dan. So I would just invite attendees. Are there any other questions anyone might have? I see Dan, thank you for putting the springboard email address into the chat also, where our colleague Jane will be able to answer any queries you might have as well. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this evening's discussion. Hopefully I see some of your names come through our roll of applications. I'd just like to thank our panelists, Angela, Miriam and Gemma, for so generously giving up their time this evening and sharing their wonderful, unique experiences and journeys with us. Thank you to Dan for providing some information about the course and what's involved. And thank you everyone just for tuning in this evening. Brilliant.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Hazel. Thank you. Thanks, guys.